Please. It has been a very intense day. It's been a very busy day. We're doing something a little different. We are going to go back to our small group format starting next week. But for this week, we are going to continue on with the group format where we'll be in this room and then next week. And you know what? I'm going to go and tell somebody to turn on the air conditioner because you're right. I don't know. My wife is looking at me like you never say that. But we've had the heat on all day. It has been at least 52 degrees, which means the top has come off my car. I have driven around with the wind in what was left of my hair once I got it cut. And today we're going to talk about toxic people, toxic relationships, and even, dun dun dun, dramatic music plays, toxic churches. Now, for those that is new, this is a discussion-based forum. You are welcome to chime in at any time with questions, comments, things like that. Also online, when you're online, say hi to us so that we can see you out there. And you can also answer your questions there, and I'll be watching for your answers so that we can respond to them as well. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Paul, make sure we have chairs for everybody. He's an usher. Usher, you got to ush. Why don't you put chairs at the ends of the tables for people too? All right. We have a full house. Glad everybody's here today. Sammy has opened us up in prayer. First question. What, dun dun dun, is a toxic person? How many of you heard the phrase toxic person used? You've heard somebody say, you know, that person. Okay, so somebody's saying that person is toxic. Let's give me some of a person. Now, we're going to go relationship. We're even going to talk church. So we're going to just stick to this is something an individual can have that you're like, hey, that person, toxic. What do they like?
Gossipy.
Okay, one at a time. I heard nasty attitude, right? Somebody give me another one.
Gossipy.
Gossipy. Somebody give me another one.
Selfish.
Selfish. Destructive.
Spiteful.
And we're going to have to stop this at a certain, I'm like not even getting close.
Narcissistic.
All right. Selfish. Destructive. We're going to do 10 and we're going to stop, okay? Selfish, destructive. Someone said narcissistic. Can you spell that? Yeah.
N-A-R-K.
Narcissistic. I think I'm close. I know there's two S's in it. Nasty attitude, gossipy, selfish, destructive, narcissistic. What'd somebody else say?
Secular ways?
Secular? We'll say fleshly. How about
There
fleshly?
you go.
I said spiteful, but it's
Spiteful? No, spiteful's in there.
deeply.
But it's a deep kind of spiteful, right? Some
It's
people
like
are.
they plan evil. They plan evil deeds.
Some people are kind of a fun spiteful. Is that accurate to say? Like a funny spiteful? If you've ever hung out with me at a church governmenting type thing, then I'm kind of the funny sort of sarcastic, I hope. All right, we got 3, 6, 7. Give me 3 more. Lying. Okay.
Jealous.
Jealous. 1 more.
Condescending.
Condescending. Oh my gosh, that's not spelled right. I hope that word's not even showing up on our stream. I'm not even gonna. Kristen's back there just spinning in her not grave because she's still here, but whatever you spin in when you aren't quite there, but your husband is spelling things atrociously on the board because he's in kind of a quick thing. All right, so what is a toxic person? Nobody said drama. Are toxic people like big dramatic people, generally speaking? How many show of hands say, hey, I am toxic, me?
Some
Right.
days are.
Some days, yeah, okay. You know what? That's nice because here's the thing. As I'm doing this tonight and I'm reading these things, I'm like, man, how many of these on this list are me? Right? Like that's my first thought. I even called Kristen. I was like, okay, honey, listen, I'm doing this thing tonight, and this is what they're talking about. And I'm like, is that me? Do I do that? And she's like, no. And she's saying no in a way that she's like, loving in my wife, but there's a little bit of maybe not completely truthful there, like let them off easy. No, that's totally not you, honey. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Right? So now, what do we think? These are all great, right? And some of these, I will tell you in the verses we're going to look at, they are actual biblical definitions of that, right? What would we say before I get to my Bible verses? If I were to ask you biblically, What is a toxic? Oh, she is just adorable, right? Sorry. No more class. We're all playing with the baby. Hi, baby. Yes, a baby. No, sorry. So biblically, right, because this is just off the top of our head, but can any of you think of places in the Bible where it describes a toxic person or what the... Okay, Paul, you're on chair duty. Actually, if we could probably get another table. If you take that short table, you can put it right there and put chairs. We got extra room back there. Can any of you Bible scholars tell me off the top of your head where the Bible might deal with this?
Second Kings, Jezebel.
Oh, there you go, Jezebel. Yeah. Jezebel. Man. There are things I want to say, but we're streaming. Because I was dealing with some issues, and I can't even describe the place because there's just too much there. All right. So Jezebel was a toxic person. Oh, before I even get to my verses, we'll deal into that just a little bit. So she had a relationship with a guy named Ahab. She kind of whispered in his ear. She really didn't like anybody that would confront her or tell her she was wrong, and she did not have the power to do it herself. So you know what she did? She would just go to the king and get the king to do the thing. And then when the king wanted to do something wrong, he used Jezebel as sort of his justification. He's like, "Hey, Jezebel." She's like, he wouldn't even do my favorite because Ahab wasn't even brave enough to just say, "Hey, this is what I want." He'd go pout, right? So Ahab would be all. Until finally Jezebel says, "What's wrong, honey? Are you okay?" He's like, "No, there's a vineyard right there, and I'd kind of like to have my vineyard there, but that guy's got his vineyard there, and that makes me very sad." And she's like, "I got you, baby. I got you." And so she constructs this elaborate plot to where basically there's a feast, and she sets this guy at one of the places in the feast and sets two really terrible people on either side, who in the middle of the feast, both of them stand up and say, this guy just took the Lord's name in vain. He just used the holy name of God in vain. You got to kill this guy. And now he has two witnesses saying that, and so he's taken out and killed, and Ahab gets it, right? And just a horrible way of dealing with all conflict, right? Hey, I mean, just ask me, right? But actually, he didn't want to sell it, so that wouldn't have worked. I like Psalms 1:1, and without even turning to it, I could tell you.
I was going to say Psalm 1.
Psalm 1.
Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of the scornful.
All right, say it again.
Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of the scornful.
So
But
three.
his delight is in the law of the Lord. The law of
That's
the
verse 2. We're on verse 1. That describes the good guy. We're staying on the toxic people first. So on the three things we got there, what are the three types of toxic people? Where's the first kind of toxic person there? Blessed is the man that
ungodly.
walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly. What is an ungodly person? I don't think has anybody ever been talking to somebody in the last couple of weeks and been like, yeah, you know so and so, they're ungodly. I don't think we use that adjective a whole lot, right? We don't use that as a descriptor a whole lot. But if I was telling you somebody was ungodly, let's define that a little. What do we mean by ungodly? Or better yet, it's talking about the counsel of the ungodly. So you're asking for somebody for advice, and the counsel they are giving you, the advice they are giving you, is ungodly. What is that? Give me what that looks like.
Telling you like be deceitful.
Be deceitful, lie about it. You don't have to tell them the truth. Oh, anybody ever worked at a job where they asked you to do something that was absolutely not, in line with your Christian conscience, right? Because the boss, it would just be easier for them if, you kind of fudged these numbers or kind of didn't tell anybody these things or, just let's get by on this, right? Like just kind of slide by, right? In the Navy, it was called gun decking.
Yep.
Gun decking, right? Remember that? Like you're supposed to do certain things to make sure certain things are a certain place, but you know what? You got behind on your other work. You didn't really have time, and so you just sort of wrote down a number to get by on it, right? It's an ungodly thing because it's literally somebody telling you, hey, no, just be deceitful, do something. Have you ever had people in relationships and they're trying to convince you, don't be honest with them. There's some people that other people only go to because they want ungodly advice. They know if they go to some people, they'll tell them to do the right thing, and that's not what they want to hear. Now, Kristen and I had something in our relationship that parallels this, and you know what that was? Kristen, if I send her to the grocery store to buy groceries, Kristen will buy the meals that we need, and she will have every day planned out, what meal we're having on that day and how things are going to go, and every dollar will fall in line with that. But of course, that's not a fun way to live, is it? Sometimes you want Doritos and Reese's Cups and everything bad, and so you know who she sends to the store? Me. Because, now that I don't eat sweets, it's not as fun anymore, but that used to be kind of our relationship, is when she wanted those sorts of things, but she could not bring herself to do it, she'd be like, why don't you go pick up such and such at the store? Knowing that I would be like, ice cream, we need that too, right? Like, I'm just, like, everything I see, there's a bright color. I was like, I like that color. Put it in the cart, right? Like, that was kind of, but some people are like that with their advice, with their counsel, right? That it is ungodly counsel. People go to them because of that. And those are toxic people, because obviously anytime you give someone ungodly counsel, ungodly things are going to happen, right? Walk in the counsel of the ungodly, stand in the way of sinners.
Or sit in the seat of the scornful.
How many of you, have anybody called anybody a sinner here lately? I think I caught the council off guard, the city council, when they were talking about, I think I told this on Sunday, the question was, what are we going to put on, there's some sign space that we have, and they're like, for National Day of Prayer, how are we going to exhort people to pray on the National Day of Prayer? And I just said, why don't you just put up there, pray you heathens, right? I thought that would get the point across, right? James would have said that, right? James would say wail, right? Mourn, right? James would use that kind of language in the scripture. We don't really call people sinners anymore. It seems a little mean, right? But y'all are. I am.
Yeah, but you call them all other kinds of names to get by with that.
We'll call them everything but that, right? But that's what we're really saying. But that one's mean, right? You call them a liar, you call them a Jezebel, you call them everything. But you call them a sinner, they're like, what? Who are you to judge? Right? That's the first thing. Who are you to judge me? And you're like, well, I'm just going off your record. Sit at the way. Oh, hey, Tammy. Hi, Tammy. Hi, Sammy. Hi, Mike. Online. And sit at the seat of the scornful. What's a scornful person like? Angry? Bitter? If you were scorning someone or scorning something, what is that? You want revenge? What does that even look like? How do you scorn someone? Hey, Mandy's not online. She's here in person, so I'll say hi to Amanda online, even though she's right there. Actually, do me a favor, Amanda. Take that table and turn it this way and bring it up and set some chairs. I know, I'm giving you a job. You walk in, we're...
Yeah, but she looks so cute.
And by the way, yeah, Paul, help her, you monster. I'm just kidding. Paul has been very helpful all day. All right, so Psalm 1. Counsel of the ungodly, standing in the way of sinners. Standing in the way of sinners would be kind of like, yeah. And sitting in the seat of the scornful, people who like to mock, people who don't like something, but they won't be honest about it and say, I don't really care about this for X, Y, Z. Instead, they try to make fun of it in order to bring that person down, because they don't usually mock the person to their face, do they?
No.
Right? They go behind the person's back and mock them behind their back because that's the way they would do it. And again, anytime you take those things into your soul, it's a kind of poison. It's a kind of toxicity. When we talk about toxic people, what we're talking about are people that we're around, they tend to poison us. Now, I talked about Sunday when it comes to deliverance, that there's also not just the prayer and the fasting and things like that go into deliverance, but there's the intentional discipline of fellowship. And by that I mean you have to have people in your life that you have godly, good conversations about, right? Listen, if you say you're a Christian, you don't like to ever talk about Jesus with somebody one-on-one, like even to somebody who agrees with you, I have questions. I have questions, right? Like, I'm not calling you out for anything. I just have, if you don't ever like talking about Jesus, you don't ever like talking about the things of the Lord, right? But then I have some people, I'm at another level with them. Because when that person talks to me, we are on mission, we are on point, we are in the same place, we're going in the same journey. One of the funny things was when I was 15 years old, I got mixed up. I was trying to find anything that wasn't Christianity, so I got into, the Satanism and any sort of occult thing that was not Christianity, because my family was very Christian. I wanted to be anything that wasn't that. And I had a couple of friends that I absolutely drugged down with me. But then I got saved, and I got really saved, and I got seriously saved. And I'm I can't stop talking about it saved. And I'm like, if you're around me, kind of saved. And guess what? Those guys came with me too, right? Because because the funny thing was when it came into my heart, And it took, I don't think while I was with them they ever confessed salvation, but later on in their lives they both came back around. So you have to have people that you fellowship with, right? So now, if we're characterizing our relationships, we say there's some people that they're toxic because they have these sorts of things. What would the opposite of a toxic person be? Would it be fellowship? How would you describe that? How would you say that?
Loving.
Loving?
Somebody who walks with the fruits of the Spirit.
Walks with the fruits of the Spirit. We're going to come to that at the very end. I got that verse saved. It's set aside.
Compassionate.
Compassionate, right?
Yeah.
Uplifting, right? So all the kind of things that they're, but basically they're pouring back in. Somebody read Philippians 2, 3 through 4. Who's got Philippians 2, 2 through 4? Somebody else get ready with Proverbs 6, 16 through 19. And I'm going to be honest, I was so in a hurry to get all my stuff done, I don't even know that I have my references written down correctly. It's been that kind of day. So hopefully whatever you read is the thing I meant for it to be. Proverbs 6, 16 through 19, Paul. And who's got Philippians 2, 3 through 4?
I got it.
All right, read Philippians 2, 3 through 4.
Do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility consider others as more important than yourself. Everyone should look not to his own interest, but rather to the interests of others.
So you have both a toxic person there. A toxic person does things how?
For himself.
Selfish ambition and conceit, right? They're doing it, but they're doing it for them. Even when they do something nice, you have somebody that you don't even like it when they do something nice for you because they're going to hold it against you. Like even the nice stuff they do, it's going to be like on your record there, writing down, you owe me one nice thing back because I did a nice thing for you, right? And it might be the only nice thing they ever do for you. You know what I'm saying? But they're always going to bring that one up. Selfish ambition, what does that mean?
If it doesn't do something for them, then they're not going to do that.
Right? Moving them ahead, right? Getting them up another ladder, right? I call it sometimes when you get together with people, they look around the room to see who the most important person is, and they want to talk to that person. And if they get stuck talking to you, they're looking over your shoulder for someone more important. Don't you love that? Have you ever had a conversation? I've been in those conversations. I was like, man, I need to be important enough that I can actually have an eye-to-eye conversation with this person. That'd be amazing, right? Anybody else? You guys been there?
Yeah, I was there last night.
You were there last night. I want to ask where you're at last night, but we're on camera, and so I'm not. Because
You know where I was at last night?
Oh, I do know where you were at last night. You're right, but we're not. It was
I was in jail.
Yeah, you were jail. Yeah.
No, I was not in it.
Yes. Marlene just got out of jail last night. Can you, Alonda? Can you shut that door over there so we don't hear the kids? As much as we love them. All right. What do you got in Proverbs there, Paul?
There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a man who stirs up dissension amongst brothers.
What was the first one?
Haughty eyes,
Second one?
lying tongue.
And what was the second? Okay, second one and second to last one. Read those two together.
Okay, second one was lying tongue, and next to the last was false witness who pours out lies.
God hates lying so much. On a list of 7 things he hates, he put it on there twice. Right? He's like, I hate lying so much. Here's 7 things I really don't like. And by the way, lying is on there twice. Now, here is something I know. People, even well-meaning people, are oftentimes bad at telling the truth. Right? I have many conversations with people where the conversation is about one thing they're telling me, but what's really going on in their heart is something completely different. I personally, the conversations I cannot bear, especially in the business world, could not stomach is you ever had a conversation with somebody and the whole time they're trying to push you to one side with their words, right? They're trying to push you into this, hey, let's get over here where, you feel this same way. Like I would rather you just honestly ask me how I feel about something and then and here's an interesting thing too, because I think good people struggle with this. The difference between being convincing and manipulative. Right? Someone compare those to me. Because we want to be, I think you should want to be convincing. If you have any measure of truth in you, I mean, listen, I have 3 boys who are old enough now to talk back intelligently on things. And sometimes I'm really like, man, I wish I could convince you of the truth. But the problem is you're still under 30 and you have no idea what the world really looks like out there, right? So you still got, amen, right? And so there's going to be a time when you're going to figure that out, right? But I don't want to cross the line and be manipulative about it. So what's the line between being convincing and being manipulative?
Convincing. You're like telling them why they should, like, hey, this is really cool, like selling it pretty much. You're selling it. You're selling what you want to give.
Yeah.
But like manipulation is when you're saying, if you don't agree with me or you don't feel the same way, you're stupid, you're bad, like just terrible things. Like if you don't feel this way, you're not quite there.
You're adding an emotional side to that when you're like a blackmail side to this. By the way, not only so convincing is here's all the reasons you should believe this way. Manipulation would be if you don't, then this is how I'm going to punish you in our relationship.
Or you scheme and make this, plan out the system and stuff to show your argument to be very convincing.
When you change the facts of the argument, knowing you're doing it, but it's easier to do that than it is to just give them the whole truth, because you could give them the whole truth and they may not believe you. So what if we just tweaked, and then we say, well, I heard or I read somewhere or,
If there's any deceit in what you're trying to do, everything's true.
Right. God really doesn't like deceit. Right? He is really not, like if you read Proverbs, you get to that place where, and how many of you raise kids and they lied to you? Right? I mean, okay, let me ask you this. Anybody raised a kid and they didn't lie to you? Right? It's just some point in their development they say, okay, truth is going to get me in trouble. Let's try something else.
Mine is like, you're 15 minutes old.
like as a child, he was way more honest. Nice. Yeah, I think that right there's a point in their development. They're like, telling the truth is going to get me in trouble. What else could I throw at this thing? Maybe I remember Tristan. We used to tell him because Tristan was so smart as a baby, never used his powers for good, right? I remember telling him he was throwing away. He would have a spoon because we didn't do plastic spoons back then, and he'd have a spoon and he'd eat off that spoon and throw it in the garbage. And we're like, no, don't throw your spoon in the garbage. And he'd get in trouble for throwing a spoon in the garbage. So he's like, instead of not throwing a spoon in the garbage, he would throw a spoon in the garbage and then throw a paper towel over it. He was a very smart kid. He's like, I get in trouble if the spoon's in there. Let's hide the spoon. You're missing the point, bud. We don't want the spoons in the garbage, right? How many of you think that God has had trouble with his own children lying to him? Right?
How about half-truths?
Half-truths, only hoping God only sees the best side of us, I want to tell a story, but I can't. It was this week I had a thing where I have a person and we were accountability partners, and I was like, man, I don't even want to confess this because I don't even like talking about myself in these terms, right? But I realized I had to because that was the only way to be honest about it, was say, this is where I was in the situation, this is what I did with it, and this is why I feel like I'm confessing it to you as a sin, right? That this is, and I'm going to be honest, you've got to have a sense of self-awareness enough to know that, right? I always struggle with church people, God bless all y'all, and myself, because sometimes we get so holy, we forget other people struggle, right? Like we're just so fixed, we forget some other people are broken. And then, sometimes I get people saying, well, why aren't you doing something about so-and-so messing up? And I'm like, well, a lot of times I have already been talking to him, we've had a relationship, but my question is, well, what do you want me to do? You want me to go beat him? We go hit with just take a stick and sit there and beat him? You want me to call out sinner and ring a bell in front of him? How do you want me to announce that this person's going through some stuff? And the problem with that is on the other hand, I want Christians to strive for holiness and live a holy life, right? I want to strive for holiness and live a holy life, right? But the song that I kept singing today, because I wanted to do some praise and worship to get my mind in the right place, and I kept and the song I kept coming back to is a song by Steve Camp that says, it pounds like thunder within my breast, all the anger of my humanness, because I call you Lord, but I must confess that I'm a stranger to your holiness. Right? For all of my words, there's still this very much, I have fallen short of the glory of God. Right? And so to God, we're kind of toxic people. right? In context, I mean, listen, compared to God's attitude, I have a nasty attitude, right? Compared to God's attitude, I'm kind of gossipy, right? Like, I like to talk about things instead of addressing and being honest. Sometimes I just go tell my wife what a so-and-so y'all are, right? I'm selfish. Oh my gosh, in light of God's holiness, I am a very self-absorbed, self-centered, all about my needs kind of person. Destructive? Absolutely. There are times where, because I'm trying to get my way, I run right over. One of the dumbest things I do, and you guys just got out of the eating disorders class, is that when I study, I just shove food in my face because, like, the faster my brain goes, the more calories I feel it takes to put that in there. So I'll go through a box of granola bars, just, oh, there's only 8 grams per, so how many is 10, right? Like, it just, you know what I'm saying, and I'm realizing I'm being destructive, right? Because I'm literally hurting my own body, and but I'm doing the Lord's work. I need the food, right? Narcissistic, I lean that way. Kristen and I, when she needs it, she'll be like, Mr. Narciso, and I'll be like, all right, I get it. We've been married a long time. We know where we're at. Fleshly, right? Yeah. Spiteful, lying, jealous, condescending. I want to make a joke about condescending, but it'll come off wrong and you'll hate me. But in comparison to God, we're all of these things, right? In comparison to His holiness. So why is it God doesn't just get us out of His life? Why is it God just like, you know what? You guys, this relationship is not working out for me. I say, when God got rid of all the toxic people in His life, right? Genesis 6, when He flooded the earth. He's like, you're all terrible. Like, it got to the point where there wasn't a good person on the planet, right?
If He got rid of us now, then Jesus would have died for nothing.
Right. So what is it that Jesus brings to the table that makes us less toxic? Grace. All right, we're going to come back to that word grace. We're going to end the part on people on that, and now we're going to go into relationships. Now we're going to talk about when you've got someone else in your life. When you've got someone else in your life, sometimes two well-meaning people can become toxic to each other, right? There's some people I love dearly, and I can only have a level of conversation about yay deep. Because if I go this deep, we're going to argue, right? And so I have people, I'm going to tell you, I use Kristen as a shield sometimes for people. I'll be like, Kristen's their friend, so we're cool, right? Like Kristen, you handle this relationship for me, and I'll just love them through you, right? Because if I get close, I'm going to choke them. And I don't want to, right? So what makes a relationship, two people, and we can talk friendships, we can talk romantic relationships, we can talk work relationships, we can talk boss to employee, employee to boss relationships. What makes those kind of relationships go toxic? Or how would you describe them as toxic, all right? Like if you said your work environment is toxic, what's something happening in that environment? Lack of leadership? You know what lack of leadership is, really? It's lack of one of two things. It's either coming from the leader and it's a lack of vision, or it's coming from underneath and it's a lack of submission. Right?
Saying one thing and doing another.
Duplicity, right? I'm going to put duplicity because it's one word and that's easier to do.
Okay, how about like in a family relationship when there's too much alike? You can be together for a certain time limit, but then you both gotta get.
You know what? If you were both super loving, I don't think that's the problem.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? When we say no, because I'm with you, because there are people I'm too much alike and that's why we don't get along. But it's not because we're so much alike and how much we just really love people. It's our pride. Right? It's honestly the part of us that doesn't back down from a fight, that doesn't submit, that doesn't say no, that doesn't put the other person first, that person that doesn't put myself down here so they can be up here. That at the end of the day, that is our pride, right? And too much pride in a work environment, especially work, family, church, anything, anytime you got pride in there, it's going to make that thing toxic eventually, right? Because pride always says my needs are the most important and I'm going to do, and it's not even my needs because pride isn't about needs. Pride is I am here and I'm going to continue, I'm going to do what I do and you guys just get out of the way, right? I'm just going to say what I say because this is who I am, right? That pride will eventually turn it toxic because there's a lack of give. Right? Do you know what grace is when we talk about grace over here? All on this person, what's the thing that Christ brings to the table that evens out all our toxicity is grace. Right? And pride is a lack of grace. right? And I'm going to bet you that on this relationship thing here, if we looked at relationships and we said, well, what can bring those relationships into balance and remove their toxicity, you know the same thing's going to happen over there, right?
Grace.
It's going to end up being grace again, isn't it? Well, let's finish this. What else we got? We got lack of leadership, duplicity, pride. What else? When you know it's just a toxic place to be.
You go back to attitudes on that too.
Attitude, absolutely, man.
Different priorities.
Yeah, and not a clarity in priority. How about that? Like they're giving you, do this, do this, do this, do this, and they don't give you this is when it's supposed to be done, right? So they're really just piling things on you.
Well,
I like.
in relationships, like if God's a priority in one of your lives and not the others.
Yeah, I got to finish this joke because I had a really funny joke. Well, Jim Gaffigan, when he had the third baby, and somebody said, "What's it like having a third baby?" He's like, "Well, imagine you're in the ocean and you're holding two babies and you're treading water, and someone hands you a third baby." Right? He said that's what having a third baby is like, right? So, so how do we want to give me like one or two words on that?
Productivity, quality, overall morale.
Low morale's a good one.
Yeah.
Lack of self-awareness.
So on that lack of self-awareness, I'm going to go back to productivity because I like that, because here's the thing. And they did a survey, and that's one of the things. You know, almost everybody that goes to their job actually wants to use their skills and abilities in their job to do what they know how to do. Like that's actually the number one key satisfaction thing, that you go to your job and you feel like you take your skills and your talents and they are being utilized at that job. That's actually more likely to make you happy more than the pay and anything else, that you're actually being used in a productive manner. Versus, now I was in the military, and in the military there was always if you're not busy, look busy. Because if you didn't look busy, somebody would be like, "What are you doing?" "Oh, nothing." And then they just make you do something. It wouldn't be anything important. It'd just be something. And boy, did that break down the esprit de corps, right?
Manipulative.
Manipulative. How does manipulative look in work? If we said this workplace, they're very manipulative, what would that look like?
Telling them because you're too lazy to do it, so you're making your little minions do your dirty work.
Oh, yeah, so that you could play solitaire more. Right.
Or smoke breaks, yes.
Yeah,
Or-
yeah, smoke breaks.
You'll give
One
them what
person
they,
doesn't like that boss, so they get with somebody else and stuff to sabotage that boss to get them fired.
You mean people would sabotage someone else at work? Aren't you guys all on the same
Argues,
team?
man.
I know, right? Gosh, that's crazy. That probably doesn't make you want to go into that place, right? Because then here's the thing: if they do it to another person, it'll be your turn, right? You'll get now all of a sudden you're thinking, man, if I say the wrong thing to the wrong person, right, they're going to build this little cabal against me, and boom, right?
Lack of boundaries.
Lack of boundaries. How are we at 3-6? Give me two more.
unrealistic
Expectations.
One more.
low emotional intelligence.
And,
It's a lot of words, kid. Right?
But
It's so true, like, if
solid.
you really can't comprehend it, like, it's just.
So you're talking in leadership, or you're talking employees?
Both.
Dr. Sam says negative intentions.
Ooh.
Negative intentions. When you could just tell that they don't want to do this for your good, right?
yeah.
I know, I gotta go see Dr. Sam. My back has been tweaked. All right. So lack of boundaries. What does that look like at work that makes it toxic? When I say there's a lack of boundaries here, and I hate going to that place because there's no boundaries. I can tell you what mine is, but I want to hear your guys's.
Something that should be reported to HR and it's not.
Yeah, and you know why it's not? Is because they like that person. But if it was a person they didn't like, it would get it, right?
Or,
Exactly.
or HR taking advantage of the power trip, doing what shouldn't be done.
In the
but they're
ancients,
getting away with it.
the ancients would call that a petty tyrant,
Yeah.
right? They have a very tiny kingdom, but they are the absolute lord of that tiny little kingdom, right? Very territorial. Don't you just love it? Because then you know at some point you need something from that person, and you're trying to do anything in your job not to interact with them.
Let them get by with murder just because you don't want them to quit on you.
You know what? Here's an interesting thing about that, because that is one too.
Yeah.
Because a lot of bosses like to be the good guy. They want to be affirming. They want everybody to like them. And so when someone does something wrong, they never call them out on that. And all that does is make all the people who are trying to do the right thing feel worse about the fact they put in all the effort to do the right thing when you're going to treat somebody who does the wrong thing just as well as you treat me who tried to do the right thing.
I don't see it like that. I see it in a little different light, though. I see it.
Well,
that
you're wrong.
They don't.
I'm just kidding, Marley. Go.
I see it. They don't want to. They'll let them get by with something. They don't want to let them go and put themselves in a bind.
Yeah.
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 Communication. Tammy's got communication. They're lacking communication, right? One of the things that they tell you too that I like this is if you're a leader, you have to over communicate. If you lead something, you have to over communicate. You have to talk about your intentions, let people know where you're going. In worship, I always tell Ashley, there's little cues in worship. If you're leading worship, if there's like a little half word you can put right before a thing starts, especially because sometimes we like to wing it, right? We like to just go off the reservation, right?
Really?
But there are ways to kind of let the band know that you're going this way, before you get there. And that way you're communicating to them in some subtle way where you're going. Because I'll tell you who doesn't like winging it. It's always the piano players. And here's why.
It's the logical thinkers, not piano players.
They're not only are they logical thinkers, but if I mess up on the guitar, half of y'all won't notice. But if you mess up on the piano once, right? Yeah, it sounds dissonant, right? Like guitar is so muddled anyway sometimes. It's kind of, Now lead guitar you can mess up on a specific way. So I get that, right, where they want specific notes. And I was kind of raised in the gospel sort of, play this, and we just all played it, right? Yeah, but that not having communication, because when you don't have communication, you don't know what's expected of you. And you want to perform and do the right thing, but if you don't know what's expected of you, right? So then lastly, and of course, what's the override? So what if we say grace can override these types of things? Now, in this thing, grace is a part of that equation, but I don't think it's the whole part because, like for instance, if someone constantly doesn't communicate the right thing and I'm constantly giving them grace for it and saying, well, it's okay that you're constantly doing the wrong thing, am I really helping?
No, you're enabling.
You're enabling. So,
Grace and direction.
It's like if you're
how do you correct someone who's in authority over you?
That's how I wrote it down.
Huh?
gracefully.
Very gracefully, right? So even when you're offering correction, right? Because if they have the power over you, you're kind of in a different environment. You're in a different place than, hey, knucklehead, you're doing that wrong. Just throw a marker and hit them with it, right? You're actually in more of a,
Some people
right?
can't do that.
Right.
Nothing works.
Yeah. There's some people, no matter how you communicate, they're gonna be in that way, right? I'm gonna come back to this in just a second. Now, lastly, churches. Dun, dun, dun. How many of you have gone to a toxic church? Anybody? I've been on staff at toxic churches, so I was, it's tough. It's tough. What was the thing? Oh, Kristen was always like, yeah. Oh, I heard, and this probably won't. Listen, I've been on staff at a lot of churches. You won't be able to figure this out, I hope. But I remember one time a pastor telling me how he had used his position as a pastor to get a really good deal on someone else's truck in the congregation that he wanted to buy.
Yeah, that's not.
I was just like, why are you telling me that like you're happy about it, right? Like, why are you saying that like he was proud of it? Like, yeah, they, because I'm their pastor, they, and then these people didn't have, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, it hurts me to be near you, right? So with that cheerful note, what does a toxic church look like?
Condescending, manipulative.
Condescending. I'm just going to abbreviate some of these. Manipulative.
Yeah.
I'm going to say,
Gossipy.
Oh, yeah. Toxic churches got gossips, right?
Exclusionary.
Exclusive.
Lots of clicks.
You're not in the club. There's a club and you're not in it. Welcome to outside, right?
I don't know how to say this. Unwilling to change.
Yeah.
Exactly like that.
Oh, what's the word? No, unwilling to change, but it's
Rigid.
like
Rigid.
you're hard-headed. You're
Stubborn.
stubborn.
Yeah.
Stubborn.
No.
Yeah. Stubborn, obstinate, won't change,
You're
right?
Yeah.
Tammy says judging.
Judgy, judgmental. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 more, and then actually 3 more, and then I'm gonna take the last one.
But the other side, too permissive and not following the word.
Too permissive, right? Like they're just so seeker friendly. Nobody's doing anything wrong ever. Again, the same thing we talked about, where if you have a job where they treat the people who do wrong like they did right because they don't want to confront it, it makes the people trying to do right feel bad for doing right. If you have a church where everybody's just kind of winking at everybody else's sin, you're like, well, why am I trying to live a holy life, right?
Sam said holier than thou, that would be piousness.
Permissiveness. Piety is not necessarily holier than thou. Yeah, we'll go holier than thou, right? Self-righteous.
Yeah, there you go.
Self-righteous.
What would you call it, like, if they try to be done like when they're at church, but when they're at home and in the community, they're like.
Hypocritical. Jesus would like that one. All right, listen, I'm going to take the last one, but I know Al's got his hand. Hypocritic. Well, you guys had a whole lot for churches. All right, go ahead, but I'm not writing these ones down. We're just going to hear them real quick, though. Blasphemous, man, right? Because they're blaspheming against the image of God.
I grew up Pentecostal, First Assembly of God's, and I found myself a few years ago in the Baptist church, and to me, it was a toxic environment.
Oh, that's a good one. I'm going to have to write that one down. We're going to have to do 11 because I want the last one, but that is called...
Used for that.
I can tell you exactly what it's used for because the Bible says not to do it. They're quenching the Holy Spirit.
There you go.
Right? Any church that quenches the Holy Spirit is a toxic church. And the last one I'm going to put down, I'm surprised nobody said it, legalistic.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They got their rules, right? And if you didn't do the rules... All right, so let's talk about a few of these. Condescending. Condescending. What does a condescending church look like? Who's been to a condescending church? If you say Belvidere first, I'll throw a marker at your head. What was that? What was that church like, Sammy?
Oh, based on how you look.
Based on how you looked. I'm just looking at we're at 7:15. Oh, that's cool. I got a lot more stuff than 7:15. Right, condescending. So, yeah, go ahead.
Lack of understanding when judging somebody when they walk in the door, where you ever find out who they are, what they are.
You have to be judgmental to be condescending, right?
Appearances are very important in churches like that. How you're dressed, how you're...
Yeah, they're more about the externals, right? Jesus says, you wash the outside of the cup and you leave the inside of the cup dirty, right? You know what he called those kind of people? Whitewashed tombs, right? So judgmental goes with condescending, right? Because criticism is the highest form of pride, right? If you are critical of somebody, then you are literally saying, I am here, you are here, and instead of even helping you to get up here, to allow me to help you elevate, you're instead saying, nope, that's who you are, you're down there, right? Condescending is you're looking down on people. For whatever reason, Illinois has had the biggest spirit of, I'm here and you're here of any place I have lived, and I have lived a lot of places. But for whatever reason, even when I meet people at pickleball, there's almost this thought of, do I need to respect you, or do I need to, you know what I'm saying? Like they even you just meet them you meet them out in the wild, and they just kind of have that, where are you at in the hierarchy of people, right?
Class.
And that's why I don't tell them I'm a pastor until they swear a couple times. And then I'm like, by the way, I'm a pastor. And I'm like, that's right. Yes, sinner. No. Right? What does a manipulative church look like?
Telling people that if they give, then the Lord will give them a miracle.
Oh my gosh, give a Lord, give a miracle. Now,
Prosperity teaching,
prosperity teaching. But you know what? I'm going to bag on somebody else too, because I'm not bagging on the Lutheran church, but when we were at the Lutheran church, they had the candle lighting thing where you went up and you lit a candle for a prayer. And one of our people who used to be in a different type of church was looking for where you put the money, because literally if you lit a candle, you had to put in money. You have to we'll pray for you. You got $1. Like next time say, Pastor, can you pray for me? I'm going to send my PayPal. Venmo me $5. I will pray for you. Right? That's manipulative, right? That's manipulative. Huh? Yeah, right. Yeah. See, we're charging you by the prayer request, Antania. She prays. She got a whole messed up family that needs prayer, and I mean, you're talking. You have to be on some sort of payment plan. You'd have to be on some sort of. We'd have to finance your family's prayers. Yeah. How else can bad churches be manipulative? Taking sides or pairing people off against each other, right? I didn't even go over all the Bible verses I had for each of these things because my notes
What
are
would you
so.
call it though if they would make you feel dumb. If you're coming there to learn and they just make you feel like you don't know enough or you should know more or.
I would call that, yeah, I would call that condescending, right? I had, I honestly had verses, gosh, I had verses for all of this, and I don't know where I wrote them because of how in a hurry I was to get my notes together. Yeah, it's been a very busy day. Normally I have a whole process I go through, and I was like literally doing a counseling session, and as I'm talking to them, I'm writing my notes down like off to the side for tonight. That's how crazy today has been. In the context of relationships, one of the places in the Bible where we see one of the most toxic relationships actually involved the same person, David and Saul, and David and Absalom. So Saul was very toxic to David, and these are the characteristics of Saul. Saul is like, I'm in a bad mood. David, you've got to make me not in a bad mood. David's dancing bear, hey, don't be in a bad mood, right? Saul's like, that's great, still in a bad mood, throw a spear at him, right? Like, didn't work, gonna try and kill you, right? But then Saul would be really remorseful and really sorry, and oh, David, you're a better person than I am, and I'm so sorry, right? And David's like, okay, cool, I'll start playing the music again. No, I'm gonna throw a spear at you, right? Like it didn't. And this is where I look at myself and I say, am I that way sometimes? Am I the kind of person, like especially, with your spouse, is always gotta be the most careful, because if you're gonna be angry at anybody for whatever reason, it's always your spouse, right? And like, well, what's the difference between somebody who messes up and then tries to make it up versus, a toxic person who is only making it up with you in order to make it easier to mess up with you the next time?
That would be Samson and Delilah.
Samson and Delilah, she was toxic, right? Listen, if you ask a girl 5 times, if a girl asks you 5 times, how do I kill you? And she tries all 5 of those times, she's telling you something. She's sending you a message. Yeah, if you tell somebody this is something I really don't like and they go do that thing to you, that's a red flag, right? That's a maybe this person doesn't have my best interests at heart, right? Samuel and Absalom, does anybody know the story of Absalom in the Bible? That's one of my favorite stories. So Absalom was David's son, and Absalom was mad at his dad because his dad was a terrible dad. When you read the verses and how Absalom was treated, there was basically an injury against Absalom that David should have gone in, met with his son face to face, sat down, fixed this thing, made it right, but instead he just sort of let it ride. Something bad happened. He didn't go in there and fix it. Absalom absolutely let that seed get planted in him and made him more and more bitter. So what he did was he stood at the gates of the city, and when anybody would come in to see the king, he would say, the king doesn't have time for you, but if you want, you can tell me, since I'm his son. And I really wish the king had time for everybody, but he doesn't. And so he begins to take away the favor of the people from David, right? And eventually David gets cast out of and has to go on the run and ends up fighting against Absalom. And the thing about it is, Absalom, if he had had the chance, would have absolutely killed his father. Absolutely. But when David had the advantage over his son, he told his general Joab, don't kill my son. I hate this story. I hate the story so much because, because what happens in the course of the battle is, of course, the battle does go the wrong way. Absalom has this long flowing hair. He goes running away from the troops of David, but he gets his hair caught in a tree, yanks him off his horse, and he's literally hanging from the tree by his hair. And Joab comes up and says, all of you are going to kill him so that we can't say any one person did. And he had every one of his men run a spear through him. And there's just this part in the Bible where it says, Absalom, Absalom, my son, right? David cries out after him. And the thing is Absalom hated him, right? Absalom would have absolutely killed him. And actually, if you look at the relationship of Joab and David, that relationship was completely toxic too. And David's problem in all of those things, David, when you read the Psalms, he is a person who understands his own failings and his own need for grace. And because he so needs God's grace and understands how bad he is, he never tells anyone else when they do wrong, and he just is permissive and lets them get away with it because it's easier to let them get away with it than it is to confront it. And you come back to that same place where you end up in a toxic relationship because you never confront the bad. But here's the thing, if you're in a relationship with somebody and you can never tell them they're wrong,
That's a problem.
that's a huge sign. If I'm in a relationship with you and you can't say, hey, I disagree with you there, that's not good. right? That says you're afraid of me for some reason, right? You're afraid of this relationship. You don't have that security in this relationship to say, you're wrong on something, right? Now, I'm not going to try and convince you. I might even argue, right? But, oh, Ashley, that's going on your record. Was that out loud? Tammy said, fake people, how you look, holier than thou. Absolutely. What book is that? That would be in, I believe, 1 Kings. I would have to look that up. But I believe the story of Absalom. Just Google Absalom and it'll show you the verses on that. But it's just, and if you look at the relationship with Joab and David, Joab and David's relationship was so bad in the Bible that when David is dying and he's on his deathbed, and his son Solomon is there, and he's like, Solomon, I want you to promise me a couple things. And he says, and by the way, Solomon, don't you let that man's gray head go to the grave in peace. Like he's like, I don't care what else you do, Solomon, you kill that man. Because Joab, if you watch his relationship with David, Joab was absolutely selfish, destructive, narcissistic. He was spiteful. He was lying. He was jealous. There was one point at which, when David was ascending to the throne, there was one son of Saul who had a claim to the throne, but he wanted to make peace with him. And so Joab, he comes to David. David's like, you know what? There's going to be peace between our house. And he's like, okay, cool. And so he walks off. And then as he's when Joab's like, hey, wait up just a second. He's like, David had one other thing he wanted to tell you. And he stabs the guy, right? Like, that's who Joab was, right? So Joab was deceitful, spiteful, worked behind David's back. David's like, yeah, there'll be peace. He's like, yeah, pieces of you everywhere, right? I mean, that's, and so David ends up with these relationships. And you know what he does to Joab for that? He says like one bad thing about him. He's like, that was bad, Joab, right? And that's it. And just like, no, you're not my general anymore. No, you're not in a position of authority. Just you please don't stab people. I will say I'm pretty lenient with my staff, but I don't think I would let them get away with the stabbing. I'd be like, no, you came to the staff meeting and you stabbed the person beside you. And I get it, they were being annoying, but you can't stab people at staff meetings. That's fair. Yeah, that should be in the policy manual somewhere. You're right. That should be written down. You can't just verbally say that. That's outside of staff meetings. Context. Right. All right. So again, here's, gosh, I really want to get to this thing because here's the thing. There's a connection between revelation, intimacy, and toxicity. And by that I mean we are all toxic in the presence of God. There is a bentness, a brokenness to us. I was telling somebody the other day, I don't believe in purgatory, but I get it. I get where they came up with it. Because sometimes when I look at me and I'm thinking, you put me in heaven, I don't fit, right? I still have evil desires and I still have bad thoughts and I still have things going on inside of me that you put me in a perfect heaven and I don't know. Right? And I don't know how God evens all that out or figures all that out between here and there. I know he does, but I know there's a fixing that's got to go on. And so the Catholics are like, what if you just burned for a while? Right? Like not, well, I don't think say eternity, but let's just say God sets you on fire for 10, 20 years, right? That'll burn all the badness out of you, right? Listen,
It better be more than that. Because
I was going to say, I know me, it's going to take a lot more, right? I don't know that you're ever going to, right? So there's something that has to happen there. So I get that, right? That there's something that happens between here and there when we're in the presence of God, because right now we have victory from the power of sin, but we don't have victory from the presence of sin, right? Christ has given us victory from the power of sin. It no longer dominates us. It no longer is our master. Yet we still have the presence of sin, and there's still sins that we struggle with, that we fall into in our life, right? So there's a way in which we're toxic to him. And so how does he wash that out? By the grace of his son, by dying on the tree, by saying, I can outlove your hate, I can outforgive your sin, I can outmercy all of your actions. It's just so if there's a math equation, you take everything I did and you put Jesus and his grace and mercy and love, that is just way more than all of the things I can add on this side of the equation.
You know what I think of when you say that is just like say I agree with that, okay, but if we had to take a step back into purgatory because we don't really deserve to go to heaven and all that kind of good stuff, it would be like working your way to heaven.
It would be like that, right? Like if you could just set me on fire long enough.
Yeah.
Right. And you're right, it doesn't work. Now, let me throw this back, because now that's in relationship to God, right?
Then Jesus died for then got, like Tanya said, Jesus would have died for nothing.
Absolutely. Now, all of you guys, in some level, have at least one of these things in your life when it comes to the relationship with the person you are closest to. Be that your spouse, your best friend, whatever. You have some level of selfishness, some level of narcissism, some level of lying, jealousy, condescending, some level of some of these toxic traits in every relationship you're a part of. So there's an equation there, isn't there? Because in order for that relationship to be toxic, you have to have more of this than you have of this, right? So if at any point Kristen wants to pull out the scorecard and say, you have done these things wrong, right? And this is important because I do, marriage counseling, relationship counseling, stuff like that. I have sometimes no idea what to say to people. Sometimes they tell me some crazy stuff, and I just look at them like, man, I hope it works out. Like, good luck, right? But at the end of the day, there is somewhere in your head an equation of how much that person brings to the table versus how much you have to give out of yourself. There's a how much I'm giving into the relationship versus how much they're giving into the relationship. And even the secular definitions of a toxic relationship are one person is always taking from the relationship and never giving back in. One person is getting all the benefit from the relationship and the other person is putting all the work in. If both people aren't putting in some level of work, right? Then that relationship is a toxic one. Be it in church. If you come to church and you feel like you're always doing for the church, you're never filled by the church, the church is never pouring back into you. You're not through worship, through the service, through serving the Lord in that church, you're never filling anything out. There's going to be an imbalance somewhere there, right? Like at your job, it's the same thing. You have an equation in your head that says, this is how much I pour into that job, and this is the satisfaction of it. The thing about the job is there's also this thing called, I need to live. Right? like it takes X amount of money, and that's why a lot of people will try to up that little money number in order to, tie you into a job that maybe, like sometimes you'll say, man, that place pays awesome, and they have to. Right? There was a trucking company that we used to talk about in Southwest Missouri that I won't mention, but it was basically known for you will get paid the most money you will ever get paid, and you will hate it more than any place you've ever worked, right? And that was the environment, right? They gave you a lot of money because they had to, because it was a terrible place to work. They would literally eat your soul, but to balance out the equation, they put in X number of dollars. Now, here's the thing. I can't pay my wife into loving me in our relationship, so I have to find other ways, right?
Money's not worth it.
Money is not worth it, right? It isn't. And there's the equation. All of this comes to this place, right? Because here's the thing that we're looking for. In any relationship, be it in a relationship with another person, in a relationship, not so much with your job, but in a relationship with the church especially, you're looking for some amount of intimacy and connection, right? You want an authentic intimacy, an authentic connection. You want to be known. Nobody wants to be alone in the world. Nobody wants to feel like no one knows them, sees them, hears them, right? Cares about them, right? You want something of that back. But here's what happens in toxic environments or in environments where there isn't, is you don't have the authentic intimacy, you don't have authentic connection, you have this fake connection, this false connection, this illusion of connection. I mean, the reason why pornography is so rampant in our society is because it's a type of counterfeit connection. It's not really a connection with another person, but it will do. Right? Instead of, actually being in a relationship and in a loving, committed, and married and all that, right? Well, this is close enough. Some of us are that way with food. We want comfort, but carbs will do. Right? Like I really want someone to put their arm around me, tell me they love me and it's going to be okay, but I'll take mashed potatoes with bacon and cheese and butter, right? And sour cream. Kristen doesn't like sour cream, that's why I didn't put it on there for her vision, right? Right? Like I want someone to wrap their arms around me and tell me it's going to be okay, but you know what? If I eat enough of this food, it kind of releases the same sort of thing, and I have sort of a false intimacy, I have a false connection there, right? And that's that, I mean, we're just so choking on that, right? Shame enforces isolation and destroys intimacy. Man, there's so many things I wanted to get to. I know we're already past time. Maybe we'll continue some of this next week. Because at the end of the day, here's the real question. We're talking about all of these things, and I hate it when we do this in messages when we go a whole lot into the diagnosis and not a whole lot into the cure, right? We talk about everything that's wrong. We don't get into talking about how to make things right. The thing is there is a way to make each of these situations right. Like you can be in a toxic church and make the church less toxic, right? You can be in a work environment, make the work environment less toxic. You can be in a relationship with a person and make that relationship less toxic through your actions. And the question is there, and that maybe is what we'll get into next week a little bit. Oh, we won't, will we? Because we're going to be in small groups next week. I'll tell you what, I'll do an online devotion and I'll go over it. You guys can throw me stuff online because I do want to finish this. I want to make it a little more, I want it to put together a little more in order. The chaos of this message is just killing me. Because the question is, how do we make all of this less toxic? And here's my thing, right? What does the song say? How he loves us? If grace is an ocean, we're all sinking. Because if I took a drop of arsenic and I put it in this glass and I drank this, I would be killed immediately. But if you went over to the Belvidere water tower and you put one drop of arsenic in that Belvidere water tower, nobody would be affected by it because it would be so diluted by the amount of water. That's why I say there's such an amount of God's grace that he dilutes all of the toxicity. Like all of the things we bring in, there's such a washing of grace. If grace is an ocean, we're all sinking. And all of the bad stuff just gets dissipated in this amazing amount of love that he has for us, right? And so the question is, how much of that can you bring into a relationship to dissipate all of the things that have built up in that relationship? Because a lot of times toxicity, especially when it comes between two people, hinges on unforgiveness, spoken or unspoken, right? That somewhere that root of unforgiveness has gone so deep and has gotten so bitter that no matter how much water you pour in the cup, it tastes like unforgiveness, right? And when that person talks, it tastes like unforgiveness. And they reach out to touch you, and it tastes like unforgiveness. And they want to be close to you, and it tastes like unforgiveness, right? It tastes like all the things that person has done wrong to you every single time you interact with them. And you're like, this is toxic. So we'll do an online thing and talk about how to... I love leaving on that note. That's an awesome note to leave on. Way to build them up. I've been telling the Lord lately, I got to encourage more. Go team. You're all terrible. We're all Calvinists now. You're all horrible. Any closing thoughts? I'll give you guys the last word here.
If you stay in a toxic relationship or job thinking you could change it, that leaves you to be corrupted by that too.
Yeah, okay, yeah, right? Because again, if there's enough of that, if there's enough poison in the water, right? And that's where you've got to figure out how much water you have to give. You've got to figure out the equation. This is how much. And sometimes you're like, Lord, I don't know, right? And then you put it in the Lord's hand. You're like, Lord, if I need to go, you know what I'm saying? And then he gives you all these signs, and you're like, okay, like 3 more signs, and I'll definitely listen to you, Lord. He gives you 3 more signs. Okay, but if you really say this, then that's right. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times you do have to or you have to go, before godly counsel, find people who are going to give you good advice. Say, this is where I'm at. These are the factors, right, that are going into this. Can I make a difference here, or is it making me different, right? Who's influencing who? I always said, because we used to do the food pantry in the sanctuary, and people were talking about, you let certain people into our sanctuary, they're going to corrupt it, they're going to defile it, and they're going to make it unclean, like they're going to bring their garbage in there, and we're going to have that stuff hanging out in our sanctuary. And I'm like, that is not how our sanctuary works. You don't come in and make our sanctuary dirty. You come in here and the sanctuary makes you clean. There's a holiness in that place, right? That I even give it reverence when I come in here, nobody else is here, because I know I'm walking in that place and I don't want any unclean thing in there. I watched a video today and it had a swear word in it, and I'm like, this was my office computer and I didn't know that was going to be there. It just made me mad because I don't want that in our sanctuary, right? I want that place to be clean. I want it to be holy. I want it to be pure, because I want a whole lot of grace, so that when all of us bring our crap in there, it just washes it all away. Right? There's just enough grace and mercy and love in that place to wash it off of us when we come through the door. Right? All right. I said last word, then I totally took that. See, the line is on there, and God hates it twice. Go ahead.
Can I add to that a little bit?
Yeah.
I think that's why people are so attracted to us as they are, because when they come in, they don't feel they don't feel that condemnation. They don't feel that judgmentalism. They may not even understand what it is that they do feel, but they're going to find out when they get. The more they stay, the more God will be able to reach.
Because we're intentional about the ingredients we add to the mix, right? We're like a big stew, and everybody gets to add their ingredient to the stew, right? But the more careful we are to add the right things, right?
We all have something.
We all got stuff.
So, help people, we need to help each other take care of, deal with whatever the something is, right?
Absolutely. Al?
I try to consider the risk factors of a toxic environment and weigh out the options to eliminate yourself.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much in the toxic environment.
Yeah, like I said, there's a math to it, right? And you're kind of, you know how you fix a math, problem? You have a reckoning,
Yeah.
right? You draw the bottom line and you say, are we on a plus or a minus, right? And that's why Jesus says if you're going to build a tower, the first thing you got to do is count the cost to make sure you can finish the tower. Otherwise, you're going to have a half-built tower, and everybody's going to make fun of the fact that you didn't have enough to build it, right? You count the cost. You look. Listen, some of you guys got to look back at your relationships you're in. You got to look back at your marriages and stuff like that. You got to have a reckoning. You got to count the cost. You say the balance is here, and you know what? Sometimes you don't even have enough to pay that balance, and luckily, you can get a loan from your
I
father.
had a reckoning tonight, I paid her 2 months rent.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. All right. Dee, you want to close us out in prayer?